All right, hello once again. This is Jeff Scott of Rankin Technical College. And we have finished the classroom portion of the AWD Web Development Technologies class here at Rankin Technical College in Wentzville. But I've decided to lecture on the last 6 chapters that we didn't have time to go over. This is section 3, or the last section of our JavaScript book. Chapter 13 talks about numbers and strings and dates. Chapter 14 will talk about control structures, exceptions, and regular expressions. Chapter 15 will talk about how to work with the web browser, including cookies and web storage. Chapter 16 is all about arrays, including associative arrays and multidimensional or arrays of arrays. Chapter 17 will be on how to create your own objects or object-oriented JavaScript. And Chapter 18 are some more complex topics such as closures, modules, and IIFEs, which are also known as immediately invoked function expressions. All right, so quite a bit to go over. I'm not going to finish all of it today, but I will go over it as quickly as I possibly can and still try to get the ideas across to everyone. All right, so for Chapter 13, how to work with numbers, strings, and dates, as you can see, it's broken into basically 3 different applications, or I should say 3 different schools of thought: numbers, strings, and dates and times. Now for numbers, there's this pig application. We'll talk about it, but not much. Strings, there's just some examples of actually working with strings. And then for the dates, there's a countdown application. So it's like if you were counting down to the new year or to your anniversary or a birthday or whatever. All right? Not a particularly long chapter. It's about 25 pages or so in length. So we will go over that. All right? And like I said, my goal is to spend, I don't know, 20 to 30 minutes on each one of these chapters. Hopefully no more than that. All right? And hopefully somebody will end up watching this eventually. So, with that said, let's get started. All right? So, they mentioned here back in Chapter 2, we learned how to declare variables, numeric and otherwise. Now, as far as JavaScript is concerned, technically, all numeric variables are numbers. It does let you differentiate between floats, which are numbers that can conceivably hold a decimal point, and integers, which do not allow a decimal place. But the way it does those is with parse float and with parse int. All right, but really JavaScript pretty much looks at all numeric variables as being numbers. All right, and they talk about infinity and stuff here. I don't think that's really worth going over. I will say one thing that JavaScript is different from than many other programming languages is, for example, if I create 3 variables. So if I come through here and I say, I'm just going to make this, I'll keep it small, var x equal 10, var, let me make that a little bit bigger. It's kind of hard to see in that font size. So if I say var x equal 10, var y equals 0, var z equals x divided by y, you will actually get an answer of infinity. In some programming languages, if you attempt to do something like that, the program will blow up. All right, not JavaScript. So that's kind of nice. It says here the result is NaN. I've seen it both ways. All right. It says when you divide 0 by 0, then it's NaN. When you divide a non-zero number by 0, it's infinity or negative infinity. Okay. So they show some things here with infinity. Again, that's not really that important. All right. At least in the class that I teach, we have gone over toFixed a lot. So if you want to make something, you say toFixed 2, which is often used to make something 2 decimal places. For instance, when we did the BMI or body mass index program, I would ask for the BMI to be 2 decimal places. It's much easier to see a body or BMI of like 23.85 as opposed to 23.8471653. That's just silly. All right. So the toFixed returns a string with a number rounded to a number of decimals. The toFixed does that. The toString returns a string with the number of the given base. Okay, so by default, as it says, it uses base 10 or decimal. The toString method with no parameters is used when you need to convert a number to a string. All right. The math object has many different properties that you can work with. I do want to mention this. I don't want to get myself off on a big tangent. All right, but let's see if I still have that. I'm going to go on and show you all of these. Now, what I'm showing you right here is one of the uglier websites that you'll probably see, and to my knowledge, the website isn't being maintained anymore. So what I am showing you actually is the archived version of a website. All right, let me move this down a bit. There we go. There's the URL. You can make it a little bigger than that. All right, but it's used to be the website I use all the time, which was hunlock.com. You can see back in 2016 it was archived. So I'm going to leave it up there for just a second. All right. Now, if you click here, you get a JavaScript tutorial. Here, JavaScript numbers, strings, arrays, you can read all that. What I like about this is they talk precision, etc. But then what they typically do in all these is they show you, yeah, there's your operators, but it shows you the arithmetic methods that you can use. Don't make me a liar here. All right. There's parse int, there's parse float, there's NaN, there's a number object. Here it is, the number object properties. No, maybe not. Max value. So this is all the stuff. There we go. Finally. All right. And they give you examples of all the different stuff that's used in here. This is a fantastic site. I have absolutely no idea why it's not supported anymore. I really and truly wish it was. All right. So, what do we talk about in this chapter? First, they talk about numbers. Then they talk about strings. And you'll notice the same kind of thing. There's a big string reference. Then they talk about dates. And there's a big date reference. In a later chapter, we talk about arrays. And there's a big array reference. One of the last chapters I went over in class was Chapter 12, which was on Ajax. This is just a phenomenal site, in my opinion. Ajax and JSON. All right. Built-in JavaScript functions. Can't say enough about this site. All right. So here's some of the things that are available. Math.py. Notice they're all math dot. All right. That means that you can use them directly. They are actually object-oriented methods, but they're what are referred to as static object-oriented methods, which means that you do not have to create an instance of a class in order to be able to use them. Pretty nice. All right. How to generate a random number? Again, I can talk about this as long as I want to, you want to, or whatever. Why it's doing that, but the point is, when you work with this is what I want. I want to zoom in a little more. There we go. In my classes, we did tons of work with random numbers. When you create a random number in any programming language, to my knowledge, it always returns a random number that's greater than or equal to 0, but is less than 1. So if you want to go and convert that and actually use it as a whole number, you'll have to do a conversion. All right, I think they show one here. Oh, this returns an integer that ranges from 1 to 100. All right? If you don't like the way they show it, because I'm more used to doing it like this, again, I'm sorry, I always push my students at these sites, but again, if I go back here to, and I type in W3 schools, JavaScript, random number. All right, there's their random function, and this is the one I encouraged students to use right here. So let's grab that one, and again bring it up in our area that we've got right here. So math.random times 100 will actually give you a random number between 0 and less than 99. All right? By using the floor function and adding 1 to it, as they mentioned, it'll give you a random number between between 1 and 100. If I wanted 0 to 100, all right, I could just do this. All right? I think if I did that, and then I wouldn't need the +1. All right, if for some reason we had a reason to do that. All right. Sorry, I don't mean to get off on too random a topic here. The next thing they do here is this pig application. All right, and it starts on page 380. All right, and as they say, it is a dice game, or it's basically set up as a dice game. Requires the use of just one die, and it illustrates the use of random numbers. All right, so let's take a look at it here. All right, it's kind of nice that what they did was in this box here, they put the rules in. I've played this before, and I've never come close to 100. All right, the turn ends when a player rolls a 1 or chooses to hold. If you get a 1, you lose all your points. If you hold, you get to keep all your points. So the idea is you never want to get a 1. It's very hard to get to 100. Notice there are 11 and 36 here. You could be at 99 and you can roll a 1, and rather than winning, you end up going back to 0 again. So it's not a very hard game, so to speak. And they show you here, here is the JavaScript for it. And that basically will build this. All right, that's the HTML, I should say. If I said JavaScript, I'm mistaken. So here is the JavaScript for it. Quite a bit. So we take a quick look at it. It's document.ready, so we're using jQuery. All right, we're going to have a random number. All right. And basically, we're getting a random number here, which probably is going to be between 1 and 6, would be the only thing that makes sense, because it's a die value. We're taking a look then here. And we're either adding to the player's total, or I believe what we're doing is we're going to set them back to 0. All right, so you can see here exactly what's going on. So I guess that's it there. If you roll the 1, reset your total to 0. If you get greater than 100, you win. All right. Now, is that a great usage of numbers? Well, draw your own conclusion. Okay. I think they could have shown a lot better programs. That's the one they chose to show. Next, they talk about strings in here, and all strings have a length. So if you use the length property, all right, it will show you how many characters are in a string. Notice that since it is a property, it is not a method. There are no parentheses after it. See that? All right, some of the methods you'd use most often. Charat, we've used that one a lot, because if you ask the user if they want to run their application again and you tell them to enter a Y or an N, some people are still going to put yes in there. So we do a charat and we look at just the first character that was entered. which is position 0. Concat, which is like using the plus sign. Index of, so you can find a sub, basically the first occurrence of a substring within a string. There's a bunch of substring methods. You can actually use a bunch of these in different ways to search for the first occurrence of a string, the last occurrence of a string, several occurrences of a string, etc. 2 lowercase and 2 uppercase, which at least my students have used quite a bit. And again, as always, there's examples of all of these here. So they've got several examples here on page 387 of working with strings. All right. The first example that you see there, you'll notice that it has L-trim. Well, not only is there an L-trim, there's an L-trim and there's an R-trim. L-trim removes leading left spaces, R-trim removes leading right spaces, and there's also a trim function that you can use that will remove both. All right. They show it in here, but I believe that now there actually is just a regular trim function that you don't have to do an R trim and a trim. Let's double check that. So you'll notice that you can use just trim, which really combines using L trim and R trim together. All right. Here's comparing 2 strings. Now, if you want to compare these two, they're not going to be the same. But if you run the 2 uppercase or the 2 lowercase on them and you compare them, then they will be the same. There's also an equal ignore case. Now, some languages, for example, JavaScript, you can't literally just say equal equal like this. There's other ways that you have to do it. So all this stuff, as always, is it's going to depend upon what language you're using. All right. Dates and times, starting on page 388. This creates a new date object. All right. And that new date object will hold both the date and the time. If I created one right now, the date would be 12/7/2018. The time would be 6:05 a.m. You can also create a date object and specify a date. And they show examples here. You can create a date object and you can break down the parts of the year if you want to do that. Now, dates in JavaScript are a little bit hinky. And what I mean by that is, and I could be wrong on this, but I don't think I am, when you work with things like the day of the week, Sunday is 0. When you work with months, to my knowledge, when you work with months, January is 0. So you have to do a little bit of finagling, or at least know what the heck you're doing when you work with this. You'll notice that you can use toString, to date string, to time string when you work with dates. Not only that, if you are working with dates and you want to get just a piece of the date or time, there's get methods and there's set methods. What's the difference? Well, get methods are what are typically referred to as being accessors. So a get method will allow you to just return something. The set method is known as a mutator typically, and they allow you to change the value of something. So as it says, they're a complementary get and set, basically. All right. They show you some examples of working with dates on page 393. And they've got a program here, how to calculate the days to the new year. Well, it's not very hard for me because I'm 24 days away. But they show this, they create a new date. All right, they get a copy of the current date and time, and then get a copy of that. And in that copy, the new year, they set the month to 0 and the day to 1. All right, and then they add It says there, add 1 to the year. Then they figure out how much time is left between that date and the current date. And this is a little finagling. If it's 1 day, they do there is. Otherwise, they do there are. Okay? All right. The chapter ends starting on page 394 with this mini little countdown application. It's only, like 4 pages, I believe, long. Yes. So it says, to illustrate the use of strings and dates, the next 2 figures present a countdown application. It accepts an event name and date from a user and calculates the number of days until that event. To do this, the application uses a date object for the calculation and a string object to create the message that's displayed. Now, this is used all over the place. Example. All right. That's my daughter. That's my daughter. That's my son-in-law. They were married 10/5. And for a long time, this had a countdown date because that site had been out there, I don't know what it was, since about May. So there was a countdown on there. Of course, now it's 0 because the time has already elapsed. But you use countdown timers all over the place. All right, so they show you the HTML and the CSS, and the HTML is just to build this. The CSS takes the message that's here and makes it red and bold. And then the JavaScript, which is the last page in the chapter here on 397, actually shows you the countdown. And it's really not that different from figuring out how many days there are at New Year's. It's really pretty much the same idea. All right, so like I said, I'm not going into these chapters in any length and breadth of coverage. So to work with numeric data, you can use the static properties and methods of number and math objects. I gave you an excellent site for that. The length property of a string we talked about. All right. Dates are stored as date objects, and they're represented by the number of milliseconds since midnight, January 1st, 1970. Sometimes you'll hear that called the epoch or epoch, E-P-O-C-H, date. The constructors of the date object let you create a date in 4 different ways. That's pretty much it. So I'm going to come back in just a couple minutes and continue on with Chapter 14, which is how to work with control structures, expressions, and regular expressions. Be back with that shortly.